All right, Shannon, well, let's jump into it. I feel really lucky and honored to serve on the board of the community, which I got involved in not only because I think you're one of the best leaders I've ever met, but also the mission, which is truly helping justice impacted people have a second chance, change the narrative around people who are going through the justice system. So for you, if you could just sum it up, what is the community and what are its goals?
Yeah, it can be difficult sometimes to sum it up because we have different moving parts, but the gist of it is that we try to help everyone that's in prison come out as prepared as possible before they get out. In opposition to the model of getting them ready when they get out, which is like trying to educate a child when he's 17.
Yeah.
So all of that time when they're in was just for nothing. And then we have different projects that we're working on for that. And the other side of it is our Correcting the Narrative campaign, which is to address the narrative in society about prison and about people that have records, because underneath the entire problem is the belief that people in prison or people that commit crimes or the prison system are on one side bad people, evil, they deserve it, and the prison is effective. And that's not a correct narrative. And so we're trying to correct that with the broader story of what's really going on and who people that have criminal records are.
And those resources you're talking about leading up to someone leaving the system, you taught me a word, pre-entry. And so that's the pre-entry programs. And what are the most impactful programs that you've seen that maybe we need to scale up? And, hopefully when we're working together on justice reforms, in the U.S. Senate, like what are some of the pre-entry programs we should be focusing more on?
Yeah, man, there's a lot. I think the one for me personally that I took when I was inside that was always easily the most impactful, and I've heard this from many, many other people that were inside and did a lot of time, is one that we don't actually do because it's a larger program. It's restorative justice. So
Right.
that's one that I would always hold up as an example of trying to bring people to an understanding of the ripple effects of what they did, and it connects them to people that are actually victims and crime survivors.
Right.
Because so what the system does is it separates, but that program is proximity. It's bringing you actually saying the exact opposite. Like, it's not you go in your corner, you go in your corner, and sometimes maybe bump into each other 20 years on the road.
Right.
It's actually come together and talk and have this very helpful, maybe difficult confrontation. Because confrontation isn't bad necessarily, it can be, but oftentimes if done right, confrontation can be people talking about something that needs to really be addressed, and a greater understanding comes from that. In terms of what we do, that would be great in terms of pre-entry is giving people access to all the information that they can get while they are inside, and the ability to train and to become better in whatever area they're trying to become in, which goes into the incentives part of what the campaign is talking about with politics, is people that are inside need to be incentivized to focus on constructive things rather than right now where the system incentivizes them to shut up, watch TV, play cards, do one program when they tell you to do it, and then go to work release at some job that doesn't give you a skill, and then you come out and then you're supposed to just operate great.
Yeah. Now you've got some of the best swag for the community. It's free people problems. You've been able to very generously gift me with some swag as well. For anyone that sees you or me wearing this swag on the street, what do you really mean by free people problems?
So free people problems is a kind of a comedic way of addressing a very serious problem. And that's a friend of mine, Carl Fields, actually summed it up better than I could just from seeing what it was. And you have first world problems, right? I was something that I actually was not even previously aware of. But it's very similar with a slightly twist, focusing on the fact that people out in society, oftentimes we have problems that we actually created, more or less. They're not real problems. There's not a need to have a certain car or have a certain type of food. Having peace of mind and having health, like those are things that I think are important.
Right.
And most people can have that if they would let go of things that are keeping them from that. So
Right.
they're almost doing these things or not having these things that are a problem, when really it's a privilege. For example, one I think is a key example is getting a speeding ticket. That's not a problem, that's a privilege. Like, you're privileged to have a car and have people that are monitoring the streets to make sure that people are doing things safely.
That's right.
But it turns into a problem because you didn't want to be the one to get it. But it's the framework, it's the perception that you have and the perspective. And so it's just something that I say as a mantra to myself routinely when I'm in difficult situations or I'm not feeling good about something or stuff's not going well. And I remind myself, it's a free people problem. Because when I was inside, these are the exact problems that I wanted. And there's millions of people incarcerated that would kick me or punch me for complaining about the things that I'm complaining about, knowing the ones that they actually have.
Right. Well, I encourage everyone to get the swag. I think it looks good, but also a great message. I think you're one of the most extraordinary leaders I've had the chance to meet, and I feel very honored to serve on your board for the community, which is doing amazing work to help with both pre-entry and re-entry for justice-impacted people. So, first of all, say a little bit more about the inspiration for starting the community and some of the work that you're doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, the inspiration, of course, was me spending time in prison. So seeing how, before I went, I wasn't really interested in this issue. I wasn't interested in the system, like most people aren't until they're exposed to something that they never really thought about. Or they had a very preconceived, stereotypical notion about, its value, its effectiveness, or its irrelevance, whatever it may be. And so spending that time and seeing how wasteful and destructive the system is, and how we are spending money on making things worse, actually, instead of spending less money on making things better, which is, the gist of how it operates. It's just, whatever it is about me wasn't able to ever look away from that. It's like the analogy elephant. Like it's a Buddhist analogy where you have a picture and it's kind of fuzzy and people can see different things, but when a person tells you, oh, it's an elephant, you see it, you can never unsee the elephant. And so for me, I can never unsee that. I can never look away from the effects of that, and especially knowing so many people in my life that were in prison or impacted by it in some way, that I had this ability to reach out to people, to maybe make connections. I had this ability to balance a lot of things at the same time, and this hunger to see things change. It'd be kind of a waste for me, having had so much support in my life, and even having spent 17 years in prison, still being massively blessed right now, to not share and pay that forward in a way to other people. So, I mean, it sounds cliche, but that's really as basic as it gets.
Yeah, it's amazing. And one of the themes you and I think, bond on a lot is the importance of elevating dignity over hate. There's a lot of hate out there, especially in our politics right now. And our mission with the campaign is to elevate dignity in our conversations, in our politics, and the policy that's coming out of Congress as well. And I think there are a lot of incentives right now to dehumanize, and we want to change that. And so when you think about dignity, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, dignity is as simple as, I even think you come down to it with empathy as well.
Right.
Where in order to have the ability to give somebody or to feel dignity, there has to be that empathy there.
Right.
For yourself and for others. I know in the work we do at the community, a lot of it is around narrative. And I've been digging into this more and more ever since we started it, the Correct the Narrative campaign. And behind that is the sense that everybody is the story they tell themselves and the story they tell themselves about other people every morning. And when you wake up, what do you say about your value or your lack of value? Or what do you say about the way people are going to encounter you? Are they going to set you up? Or they just want something from you? Or are they just trying to figure things out on themselves and, just trying to make the best of it, and they're going to make mistakes as well? And so kind of coming down to dignity, when I hear that term, I can't get around that concept of what we think about ourselves and people that are less off than us or are doing things differently. Because it's very easy to other a whole group of people and say, they created their own problems or they're making excuses. But once you're in that same situation, or once you are in somebody's shoes, or I would even go beyond that, saying that, put yourself in somebody's shoes is always the term that's used for it. There's an easy way to say, okay, I've been in their shoes, I did something different. But you have to be in their skin, their mind, their circumstances, everything about them. If you were that individual, you would do the exact same things they did. And so when you come to understand that basic fact you can't get around, what do you then do? What do you then do with the knowledge that if you were the very people that you're looking at, or you're feeling some hatred towards, or you're feeling some disregard towards, and you would do the exact same thing, you're essentially hating yourself. You're disregarding yourself. And you're giving justification to anybody that then disregards you or hates you for whatever reason they have, because they can make up 1,000 reasons. So there is either empathy or not empathy. There's no different, I empathize with some people. No, then you don't really empathize. It's either you empathize with everybody or you don't. And from that, you will be able to give and feel dignity, because if a person is operating in this world and they don't feel that people care, they don't feel value, and then they don't start to feel a sense of worth, everything's going to deteriorate, because people are the foundation of this whole society. And so if people aren't operating in a way that's best, then there's no way this society overall is going to. And you have a lot of the issues that we currently have now that are very predictable.
That's right. I think that's well said. And the idea of empathy is so important. And I feel like empathy is scarcely found in our politics today. And one reason for that is because there's a system, a business model in politics, billions of dollars that really profit on dehumanizing people and saying otherizing like you're talking about. And so in our campaign, we're trying to create a better kind of politics that will incentivize our leaders to work together for communities that are left out, to incentivize people to have real conversations instead of dehumanizing them. And as long, and we talk about this in the criminal justice system, if there's incentive to do something like for-profit prisons, more people are going to do it. And so I say the same thing in politics with all the money that's out there. If there's a lot of money to be made in hate, a lot of people are going to do it. So when you think about what a better politics can look like, what comes to mind for you? What would a better politics look like in our country?
Yeah, I think you hit right on where I've always been. I've never been a person that's interested in politics. Well, let me not say never. For a long time, I haven't, because I feel like every single time a politician comes about, they say the great things in the beginning and then nothing happens afterwards. Yeah. Or at least there's a complexity to it. They actually are trying behind the scenes. You're not seeing how difficult it is. And they're running into a lot of what you're speaking about. So even a well-intentioned politician will get in office and find so many different layers and obstacles based off of the fact that special interests and large, powerful people and corporations are able to hamstring them from doing something. And so you didn't, I'm going to say this, you didn't prime me at all to say this, but it is exactly what the entire point of political issues is with the incentives. Everything in life is incentives. Everything that you see that you do, you've been incentivized, whether you know it or not, to go left or go right.
Right.
And so subconsciously, oftentimes, you've gone that way because of something in your life. And so you have, exactly as you said, it can be said no better, when there's money to be made in one area, that area will flourish. And so in hate, it's been proven time and time again over the past couple of years that people are professional provocateurs. People do this as a job to foster a sense of divide. There's no more, evidence you need than people are getting money to make you hate somebody else, to say that something needs to significantly change in the incentives that we have.
Right.
And there's a view, of course, in this country that freedom and you have to be able to make your own way and people can make their own decisions. But that's not how human nature is. Humans are going to very much be gullible and susceptible to certain things because there's so much coming at them. And so if there's not some understanding of the respect for how we are incentivizing people that can easily persuade you to not persuade you one way, then you're going to have millions of people fighting over things that they actually have common ground massively on.
Yeah.
The Malcolm X quote where if you don't really pay attention, you're going to have people are going to have you hating the people that are your friends and befriending the people that are actually your enemies.
Yes.
And to comment on something you made earlier about how none of us are really enemies, the system's an enemy. And you can even go beyond that and kind of bring it back and say that we created this system or we're allowing it to exist. And so we are actually making ourselves our own enemies. So the end point here of my ramble is that what you just said at the very beginning is the key concept of, I think, what so much of the issues in politics are, is that we are incentivizing the destruction and the ruin and the divide that is existing. And we can also incentivize, peace and togetherness and, a much better way of conversing and operating.
Yeah. I think we can incentivize, greater love in this country too. I remember we were at a meeting with people who had spent 2 decades plus in the incarceration system, and I remember being so moved by people who said, I made sure that the system didn't take away my ability to love. And when you think about the criminal justice system, if we are able to change these incentives and center dignity and empathy and humanity in the system, what do you think are some of the reforms that would work well and some of the reforms that you would like to see?
So it goes back to the same concept, I think, incentives. When it comes to a system is only as good as what it is kind of moving people to do. And so, because when a person gets into a system, there's so many people that get into prison or social work fields, and they get beat down by just the barriers and the restrictions, and even the lack of gratitude, from people trying to help them. And so you have to have, one, an aspect of mental health so that those that are in that system can actually maintain their own desire and their own movement towards helping and being constructive and being a support rather than just another cog in the system, which happens so quickly. So the reforms I think that I would like to see, I mean, there's so many actually very specific ones that can be policy change, but an overall focus on giving people that are working in the system the power to actually connect with those that are in there.
Right.
And even throughout, every step of the way is this trauma-informed focus of we're going to connect with people all along the way. It's not going to be a very cold, formal, go there, do this, shut up, don't say that. But we're going to interact. We're going to accept that that's going to make sometimes a situation where people are hurt, where mistakes happen, where there will be rules broken. But the more benefit will come from that than trying to restrict everything and control everything. Because by doing that, you get more by letting go, basically.
Right.
You will actually gain more by letting go. And that's the entire focus I would like to see taken on by the system is we're going to allow there to be humanity on the side of those working in the system so that there can be humanity coming out. And right now it's all robots and metal and formal rules. And that's not a policy change that can be just written in necessarily. It's a culture thing.
It's a culture
But
shift,
it can still be addressed by the incentives, again, overseeing the system and saying, okay, we're not going to incentivize not connecting. We're going to incentivize actually how many people come out of this prison and don't come back. Like that'll allow the leadership to automatically start changing the way they do things because your job and your bonuses all are determined by are people actually coming back? Are people actually violent? Whatever it may be, that's different than incentivizing just warehousing and shut up and coldness.
Exactly. Music, I mean, you're saying it so well. I mean, I think you see, if there is an incentive to keep these prisons growing, then they're going to grow. And rather, if you turn that on its head and say, how can we reduce the prison population while still maintaining safety? I think that's one of the misnomers out there that like it's a zero-sum game between prisons and safety, and that's totally wrong. That you can have safety and reduce the prison population. And in a country that's supposed to be the land of the free, and yet we have the biggest prison population per capita in the world. So we need to change that. Now, you and I have been talking about what this campaign can be since before it was a campaign. What a new politics, an inclusive politics, a dignified politics can look like. And, we've been kind of on this journey together. So what does this Senate campaign mean to you? What do you think it can, what does it mean to you right now? And then what do you think it can be after we get elected and make our way to the U.S. Senate?
I think it only means something if a different process is implemented from the election. And so that is where I think it would be great if you were elected, because then that same process of attacking where the incentives are would be addressed. So for me, the outcome is going to depend entirely on if, I don't know all of the points of all the other candidates, but I know that the one you're pushing has always been one that resonates with me, which is, let's just address the incentive. I'm not going to come in here with all types of plans for every single thing, because those are moving parts and it's very difficult to always know what will happen then. But the way that we are trying to construct this whole enterprise can be very different. And not even that difficult, I think, to make it different. So that would, I guess, in the end, my answer there would be, if you get in, that would be the important part. That would be, the change. If everything works out when you get in there, because I know it can always be difficult.
Oh, yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, with Millennial Action Project, I've seen, those young people, they get elected, and some of whom, they truly are called to a larger purpose so they can transcend some of the incentives. But others, they get co-opted by the system. And to your point, they go in and they do something different. And that's why I think changing the business model of how politics works is so crucial. And one thing I'm excited about is when we've put out our agenda, we call it making government work for the exhausted majority. In Wisconsin, people get fired up about it. Like, for example, getting big money out of politics and ending the legalized bribery that happens. You were talking about the special interests. Right now, these special interests in the big corporations sponsor members of Congress, essentially, to help them get on certain committees. And these members, they're desperate to raise cash, so they're going to take it from the special interests. that has business in front of the committees. I call that legalized bribery. You know, so we got to change that. We got to cut that off, and people are with us on that. Or whether it's putting in place like term limits. So the goal in Congress is not self-perpetuation.
Yeah.
You know, the easiest thing to do in Congress is not doing anything.
Right.
And just go with the flow,
Right.
and you're going to stay in office for 40 years. Instead, let's make it about making an impact.
Yeah.
And then final thing, you were talking about how members of Congress often don't even do what they campaigned on because it's profitable to neglect their job right now. So I'm fired up because I think, you know, people like yourself and me and others, we know that this is in the hearts of people. We know that it's possible. We just got to mobilize on a big scale. And, you know, once we do that, it's going to transform politics. Because I'm going in, and I'm very open about saying this, I'm not afraid to lose my job in office. And sometimes there's a great saying by one of my mentors. He says, you shouldn't run for office if you don't know what you're prepared to lose your job over. So it should be about principled, it should be about principle over power, right? And yeah, man, you're the best, and you are you know, North Star for what we're talking about. The way that you've built collaborations and coalitions here in Milwaukee, the North Star around how we can have a more human justice system, and I want to thank you for that. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Awesome, man. Thank you.